Hey, and welcome to our explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive shift that is literally reshaping the future of accounting as we know it. We're talking about how sustainability reporting is going from a nice to have to an absolute must have. And we're going to break down the new rules of the game for making sure that all this new information is actually trustworthy. If you're studying accountancy, listen up, because this is your future. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the why. Why is this all happening now? Then, we'll zoom in on a real-world example from the Philippines. After that, we'll unpack the new global standard, ISA 5000, figure out the different levels of scrutiny, and then, most importantly, explore what this all means for the profession and for you. Okay, so first things first. Why the sudden urgency around all this? Well, it's all about a massive change in what people, investors, regulators, the public are demanding from companies. It's not just about the financial numbers anymore. They want the full story on a company's environmental, social, and governance performance. This quote really just nails it, doesn't it? ESG data isn't some footnote buried in the back anymore. It's a front-page headline. And whenever something becomes a headline, people need to know they can trust it. That's exactly where assurance, the process of actually verifying this information, becomes absolutely critical. So, to see how this is all playing out in the real world, let's take a look at the Philippines. They've really stepped up as a regional leader in making this whole transition happen. And they're not just suggesting change, they are mandating it. Yeah, this all got very real in December 2025. That's when the Philippine SEC dropped Memorandum Circular number 16. And that date, it basically marks the end of an era. The old voluntary system of comply or explain, where companies could just choose not to report, that's over. The SEC has laid down the law, bringing the country right in line with this growing global movement. Now, what's really smart is how the SEC is rolling this out. It's not a one-size-fits-all disaster. Nope, they've set up a clever, phased approach with 3 tiers based on company size. Tier 1 is for the big players, with a market cap over 50 billion pesos. Tier 2 gets the mid-range companies, and Tier 3 covers smaller listed companies and, this is huge, large non-listed entities with big revenues. This gives everyone a little breathing room to adapt, but believe me, the penalties for not complying are going to be way more expensive than just getting the assurance done right. And this timeline, it really lays it all out for those Tier 1 giants. See, they submit their first report in 2027, but the mandatory assurance, the part where someone checks their greenhouse gas emissions data, that's not required until 2029. That 2-year gap is basically a built-in grace period, giving companies time to get their systems in order. And for you as practitioners, this is where it gets tricky, because you'll have to figure out how to balance these local SEC rules with the bigger global ISSB standards. So, with all this new reporting now being mandatory, the big question is, how do we actually check it? How do we make sure it's reliable? Well, that's where the new global standard comes in. Think of it as the official toolkit for this whole new era of assurance. So, meet ISSA 5000. This is the brand new universal standard for sustainability assurance. And its biggest strength, its superpower, is its flexibility. It's framework neutral. What does that mean? It means you can use it to check reports no matter what framework they're based on, whether it's the ISSB, Europe's ESRS, or the GRI. This principles-based approach is what makes global alignment even possible. Okay, so how deep does this checking process actually go? Well, ISA 5000 lays out 2 very different levels of scrutiny, and getting this distinction is absolutely crucial, because it changes everything, the amount of work you do and the confidence level of your final report. The first big difference is just the sheer amount of work you have to do. Limited assurance involves fewer, less detailed checks. You can kind of think of it like a review. Reasonable assurance, though, that's the highest level you can get. The procedures are super comprehensive, a lot like what you'd see in a classic financial audit. And naturally, that difference in the amount of work you do directly impacts the language you use in the final report. Limited assurance gives you a conclusion that's worded in the negative. Reasonable assurance, on the other hand, is stated in the positive. This wording is basically a code that signals your level of confidence to everyone reading the report. Let's make this super clear. A limited assurance report will say something like, based on our work, nothing has come to our attention. See how it doesn't really endorse it? But a reasonable assurance report makes a much stronger claim. It says, in our opinion, the information is fairly stated. It's a much more powerful and definitive conclusion. Okay, now for the part that really matters for every single accounting student watching this. This new standard doesn't just create more work, it creates a whole new competitive battlefield for who gets to do it. This right here is a total game changer. Profession agnostic. What that means is that ISA 5000 was designed from the ground up so that any qualified assurance practitioner can use it, not just professional accountants. The playing field has officially been leveled. So here's the bottom line. Accountants are now in direct, head-to-head competition with a whole new crew of experts. We're talking environmental consultants, engineers, you name it. They can all use ISA 5000 now. For the accounting profession, which has this long, storied history of trust and expertise, mastering these new skills isn't just a cool opportunity. It's a defensive necessity if we want to stay leaders in this space. Now, regulators get that this is a huge change, so to make the transition a little easier, the Philippine SEC has built in some relief. For example, there's a 2-year delay on having to disclose those really complex Scope 3 emissions, the ones from a company's entire supply chain. It's a practical move, for sure, but the real question is, what skills are you going to need when these reliefs run out? All right, let's bring this all home. What does all of this actually mean for you, the next generation of accountants and assurance providers? It means the skill set you need to succeed is getting way, way bigger than just the traditional stuff. Okay, take the concept of double materiality. It's a core idea in modern reporting. It means you have to look at what's important to the company's finances and what's important to the world. Under ISS 5000, you're not just checking numbers. Let's say you're looking at a clothing company. You'd have to assess how they identified the risk of water pollution from their factories, judge if that process was actually any good, and use your professional skepticism to make sure they didn't just forget to mention the impact on local communities. This requires a much broader critical thinking skill set. And that brings us to the final critical question. With accountants and all these other specialists now competing side by side with the exact same rulebook, the future of assurance is totally up for grabs. Leadership isn't just going to go to the person who's best with numbers. It's going to go to the person who masters process, critical judgment, and the ethics needed to navigate this incredibly complex new world. The only question is, will that be you?